Welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I am a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network, and we bring you guys the real news. We've got a lot of content that we release throughout the week that includes in-depth news stories. We've got a small team of people that work on these stories for you guys to really share what's going on in our world today. We've got local stories told through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet. We talk about what is really going on. So you've heard terms like deep state, right? Well, we have something called the Global Intelligence Agency, and Kimberly Gogan, who heads up the GIA, she comes on and she tells us what's really going on with that crazy deep state, which is much, much bigger than most people realize. It's not just the people that you see on TV, like that's the very low end of the totem pole. They're like at the very bottom. There's people that operate behind the scenes that most people don't even know about. So we expose all of this. If you want more information about who we are and what we do, you can go to our website at unitednetwork.earth. You can become a member. That gives you access to all of our content the moment it comes out. If not, we do put most of our content on YouTube and Rumble, although we don't control those platforms. So if we say something they don't like, it might get taken down. So the best bet is to become a member, and we've got an app you can download. We make it really simple for you guys. What this podcast is a week in review. So I like to share with you guys some of the top stories that we covered over the last week. It's a great way, if you are a member, to catch up on stories you may have missed. If you're not a member, hey, you get to learn a little bit more about what we talked about, and perhaps you can check out, again, these stories on YouTube and Rumble about a week later after they are released. You can also share this, and I encourage you to do so, with other people that might not be familiar with UNN, because we talk about a lot of cool stuff, and we need to get the word out. We need as many people to be aware of what's really happening on this planet as possible. With any information we give you guys, really think about it. Think critically. We have to go back to the time where we actually used our brain and we weren't just like these mindless beings sitting in front of a TV. I tell people news is no longer going to be a spectator sport. We have to rebuild our planet because these crazy people, that were in power for, thousands of years, did their best to destroy it. Now, that's not going to happen, but it's still up to us now to take the reins and to build the earth we always wanted. And so we need all hands on deck to do that. And to do that, you got to know what's really happening on this planet, and you have to really think about stuff and create a new world that benefits everybody. So not just one industry. We've played that game before. So with everything we talk about, really use your brain. Think critically, use your discernment, ask questions, do research, and share what you've learned with other people. We have to be vocal about this. All right. As far as announcements are concerned, this is kind of an interesting week for me. So it's Saturday, January 11th today, as I'm recording, doing this quick wrap up here. I am going to be taking a little trip with my hubby. Just full transparency here today on The Rundown. We have not been, little sidebar, we have not been on a trip together since my kids were born, and my oldest is 14 years old. So we are going to do something a little special together, and I don't know if I'm getting this episode out today, but we're going to be gone for a little bit of time. You won't see that in the news because I've pre-recorded all the stories for next week, but as far as next week's rundown, I'm not sure if I'm going to produce that or skip that. It really depends on how I feel when I come back, because we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up the following week. For example, New Earth. We've been telling you guys, listen, instead of having all of our restoration news in the news updates, we're going to create a special show for that. And we have been having a couple meetings. We had a couple meetings this week to discuss the format, what that looks like. We've got a lot of potential episodes already recorded. We just got to piece some stuff together. So it is possible that the first episode for New Earth as a standalone show is going to be not this coming week, but the following Tuesday. I believe that's the 21st. I'm not sure if we're going to get it done in time for the 21st. If not, it will definitely be the 28th. Having said that, that's really my priority, is working on getting that first episode out. That may or may not mean that there's going to be a rundown episode next week. So I just want to give you a heads up. If nothing comes out, I do apologize. But New Earth is really my priority, and I'm going to be, I'm not going to have as much time as I normally have. So that is the announcement. All right, let's go ahead and get to this week's stories. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's kick things off with our field messenger reports. These are everyday people just like you that want to make a difference in their community. We have to start talking to each other again. And that's what field messengers are all about. They share stories of what's happening in their own backyard. Sometimes that's literally, we've had people literally film in their backyard when something interesting happens. Sometimes that's their community. Sometimes people travel a little bit. We don't expect you guys to do that. We want to keep this as simple as possible. But instead of having some, I don't know, correspondent from some big network fly into your town and tell their side of the story, why don't you tell us what's actually happening? Because you are the ones that really care, because it's your community, it's your neighborhood. And so if you want more information about how to become a field messenger with United Network News, you can go to our website, and there's a whole section. Just look under field messengers. We give you some tips and stuff. We also have a Telegram thread if you need some support in working on your stories. But you don't have to know how to edit. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just go out there, shoot what you can with your phone, because we all have cameras on our phones. Send it in to us, and we have a whole production team that will put everything together for you, tie it up in a nice, neat little bow, and make it look amazing for the news. Sound good? All right, so here are the stories that we released this week. Lisa from Germany shows us a forest kindergarten. So what in the world is that? It is a kindergarten. It's not actually in the forest, and in the story she explains why. There's some potential hazards, like things catching fire and whatever, if you're right in the heart of a forest. But it is a building that is very close to a forest. This is actually in the area where she grew up, in her hometown. And so this kindergarten, it is an outdoor-based preschool for children, ages 3 to 6. And what's so cool about it is they're really about incorporating learning with nature, which I wish all schools did. I know it's more of a challenge depending on weather and things like that. But as much as we can get people outside, appreciating their surroundings, learning about nature, everything just connects. Do you ever feel that way? Like if you need to take a break, the first thing I do is I go out in nature and I just breathe. How amazing would it be to have that kind of setup for our schools? How much better would our students learn if they were just doing this as naturally as possible? And so Lisa tells us a little bit more of the history. She shows us kind of an overview of her town. Looks like a nice little place to grow up, and this, special outdoor preschool. So Lisa, thank you for that report. Godfrey from South Carolina, which is a state in the U.S., talks about the town of Marshall, which is in North Carolina, and they are rebuilding after Hurricane Helene. And obviously that hurricane caused a lot of damage. The video is really telling. Most buildings, it looks like, needed a lot of repair and still need a lot of repair. It's kind of heartbreaking. I can only imagine if you actually lived there. Like I imagine going back to my hometown, and if there was a hurricane or tornado, more likely a tornado because I'm from the Midwest, if something like that ripped through, it would just be so horrible to see, right? On one hand, it's encouraging because people are rebuilding and they have like encouraging signs up and things like that. But we also know that this kind of stuff doesn't have to happen. Even if it was natural, which, hurricanes are not natural. Hurricane Helene was not natural. There are ways to help people and help people faster. And this is something that needs to happen as part of the restoration of our planet. We need ways to ensure if true natural disasters happen, that we are as protected as possible. And then whatever the aftermath is, that we're able to help people quickly. Now, the cool thing is, from my perspective, is that we're helping each other. The government, who knows what they're going to do? They're pretty much worthless at this point. But we have to keep up that attitude of helping one another. This is how we restore our planet. If it's up to us, we will do it. It's up to government, who knows, right? So you can never count on that kind of stuff. But Godfrey, thank you for that report. Again, sad, but also hopeful. And we certainly wish you guys the best as you continue to rebuild your community. Emma out of Spain. We have a couple reports from Emma this week. So she is in Coralejo. It is in the northern part of Fuerteventura, Spain. And it is famous for its surf culture. So we got to see a lot of video of people out there on the water. She says there's a lot of surf camps and schools in the area. It attracts visitors from around the world. When I was watching the video, I'm like, oh my gosh, that looks super cold. I would need like 4 wetsuits in order to get into that water, I'm pretty sure. But it does look beautiful, very rocky. So don't fall off your surfboard. Maybe if you're further out. But she says one of the reasons it's so popular is because there's these very long waves, which I know nothing about surfing. Yes, I live in San Diego and been here a long time, and I still know nothing about surfing. But apparently with the long waves, that's better for surfers. She says there's over 30 surf schools in the area. So, hey, if you're a surfer, may want to check out Coralejo. Amy out of New Jersey, which is another state in the U.S., takes us to the Senior Center in Denville, which is in New Jersey. And this is just a lovely little story about humans helping humans, especially older humans. So this is a lively space. There's a lot of friendship there. They do games together. They go out on the town together and do community events. And Amy spoke with someone that works there and helps organize the events. She also spoke with some of the people, the seniors that benefit from that. Apparently, there's 135 members. Their building looked really nice, and it was donated to them. And the whole purpose behind this, again, is to help people. So seniors aren't left at home alone, because that's not good for you. Humans in general, we were not designed to be alone. This is why the powers that were try to divide us as much as possible, because we are so much stronger together. And I talk about that a lot, but it's true. And it's the same thing with senior citizens. All right, another story from Emma in Spain. This time it is the drone show. So there is the 37th International Kite Festival in Fuerteventura, Spain. And as part of that, they have these drone shows, and it's more than one show, but it's really cool. Her perspective was on the beach. Of course, this is at nighttime because you can't really see drones that well during the daytime if they're lit up and, fancy colors and things like that. But they had different themes. So one theme was like a beachy theme, and so the drones came together and they created like a seahorse. That was really pretty. There was like a fish. And then they even had like some announcers on the beach that would tell you what's going on, and then, also play some music. Emma said there were 220 drones in action, which is really cool because it's not static. Like they just don't go and form it and just stay there. They kind of move around. So it kind of like when they were doing this with the sea creatures, it looked like they were kind of moving in the water. Very cool what you can do with these things. See, this is an appropriate way to use drones, Deep State. Just so you know. Okay, Helen out of Australia gives us a little bit of an educational video here when it comes to mold in your home. So this is something she had to deal with, and she thought she would share with us what she learned, which is a great way to do a field messenger video. And mold can cause a lot of issues, right? It can increase your allergies. It can cause fatigue and illness. It's really not good for humans at all. So if you think you have mold in your home, it needs to be treated right away. And Helen's always talking about nature. So of course, she's going to do things as naturally as possible. And she shares with us some of the essential oils that she uses and combines together to help rid homes or any area really of mold. And she uses diffusers primarily, so she'll close the doors and everything and let these diffusers go. But she also had a spray bottle where she could spray this solution, all natural solution, on, the different wood pieces and, anything that looked like it needed it. So always good to know because you never know when mold is going to strike. Stephanie and Daniel out of Minnesota, again, another state in the U.S., introduce us to, let's see if I can pronounce this right, agrarianism. Gosh, I never use that word, but it is a philosophy that focuses on family and community. And they have a property, which I believe she said is Daniel's family farm. And I think it's called New Story Farm, if I heard it correctly. And it's all dedicated to food and education. She says, so that would be Stephanie, says they grow 80% or more of their own food. And they focus on regenerative farming. We've talked about this a lot in some of our New Earth segments, how important that is because it's just going with the land. What does the land want to grow? Historically, what has been grown on the land? And how can we make this as symbiotic as possible, right? So how do we give back to the earth for giving us the food? How do we keep this as natural as possible? That's really what regenerative farming is all about. And I think it was Daniel that said this in the video. He said, it's all about growing food that wants to be there. And I thought that was really interesting how he said it that way, because I never think about, well, what food wants to be here? I'm always like, well, what kind of food do I want here? But again, it's about the history of the land. What is typically grown there? That's probably what's going to grow the best. Where did this idea come from that every area in the world had to grow the same stuff? It doesn't necessarily. And there are seasons. So there should be times where maybe you can't get tomatoes or potatoes or squash or whatever it is that you're trying to grow just because it's not that season. We shouldn't be shipping things from all around the world and, all the chemicals and, nasty ingredients and stuff, that preservatives, because we're shipping things. Why are we doing that? No, there's just seasons, just like you have seasons in your life for certain things. We have seasons for growing. And I love the idea of asking the land, well, what should be grown here? And let's see, a couple more stories, guys. Rebecca and Dan, they are out of Canada. They share with us Farmgate Eggs. So there are farm communities, right? And they're an incredible resource. They offer a lot of fresh food. And in this case, Rebecca and Dan take us to a local farmer who has, I don't know if I want to call it a store. It was more like a building where you could self-serve. Okay, so they primarily had eggs. They had a couple other things as well. The family has been in business for 30 years, but this quote unquote store has only been running for about 7 years. But it's like a throwback to more simple times, I would say, which is very appealing to me because you walk in, there's refrigerators and stuff. You can take your eggs. It says how much it costs. And then you just pay in their little drop box in the little door. You just slide your money in there. You obviously have to have exact change. And then it was really cool, too, because Rebecca and Dan then repurpose their egg crates. They use it for growing seedlings. So I just thought it was a really nice way to do this. The other day, my family and I went to the store to get eggs, and the price was astronomical because they're throwing all this H1N1 bird flu stuff in our face. And, I haven't been able to get raw milk. There's only one place nearby I can get raw milk. And I have not been able to get it for 2 months now because of this stupid H1N1 whatever. I'm so frustrated with that. But now it's affecting our eggs. And every day I look at my husband, I'm like, we need our own chickens. We need our own chickens. This would not be a problem. Apparently I need my own cow too. So Rebecca and Dan, thank you for that story. Again, beautiful, beautiful way to kind of throw back to older times. I love the simplicity of it all. And I do think that we are going back to a time which maybe not everything's going to be unmanned. Wouldn't that be lovely, though? If you didn't have to have like all these checks and barriers and people just did what they were supposed to do. And I think if we weren't struggling for money, I think that would happen a lot more. It's just a really beautiful way of living, I think. And finally, our last story, Rosemary out of Australia takes us to a duck pond in the charming town of Gympie in Queensland, Australia. So if you like ducks, this is the video for you. There's a ton of, and it's not just ducks. There's different kind of, I was just going to say birds. I guess they all are birds. Like, for example, there was this section with black swans. I don't see a lot of black swans, but they're very beautiful. There was a bunch of birds and trees. Be careful where you walked. Maybe don't walk under that tree. But just provides, you know, if you like bird watching, any kind of bird, right? It's a peaceful sanctuary for native wildlife and very relaxing unless, you know, the birds are chirping. So maybe go to a quiet space. Now let's take a look at some of the more in-depth stories that the team and I worked on for you guys this week. So we see things happening in the headlines and it kind of spurs, oh, yeah, we should talk about that. And we'll go a little bit further in depth. And that's what we do with these stories. And so we've got a handful of them that we released this week. The first one is talking about tap water issues. And boy, we know we've got some issues there, right? Tap water in the U.S. presents significant health concerns due to contaminants like industrial waste, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and aging infrastructure. Studies show millions of Americans drink water that fails to meet safety standards, particularly in underserved communities. By the way, it's not just the U.S. This story just happened to focus on mostly, you know, U.S. statistics and things like that. Harmful substances such as lead, arsenic, and PFAS or PFAS, they're also forever chemicals, are common and they contribute to crazy stuff like cancer, fertility issues, and nervous system damage.
Nearly half of tap water in the U.S. contains forever chemicals, called PFAS, which pose health risks including cancer, according to a government study. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted the first nationwide effort to test tap water from private sources, in addition to regulated ones. PFAS compounds, found in consumer products like non-stick pans and water-resistant clothing, contaminate drinking water in cities, small towns, private wells, and public systems. While the report doesn't offer policy recommendations, it suggests evaluating exposure risk and considering water treatment. The Environmental Protection Agency is working on federal drinking water limits for PFAS. Advocates urge tackling the problem at its source by regulating chemical disposal. Private well users are advised to test their water and install filters to combat PFAS contamination.
Also, there is fluoridation, right? There's fluoride in our water. Now, that was intended to prevent tooth decay, but it also raises ethical and health concerns. Also, chlorine has long been used to disinfect water, but it can also create toxic byproducts. Some systems now use chloramine, but that also has its own risks. Lead contamination remains a critical issue, as seen in cases like in Flint, Michigan. Remember that whole debacle? The EPA has introduced regulations to address these issues, but challenges remain. To ensure safe water, experts recommend testing tap water at home and using filtration systems to reduce exposure to harmful chemicals. All right, cashback apps. Anybody use any of these apps to maybe earn a little bit money back on some of your purchases? Well, they are popular tools that help you, like I said, get some money back on the things that you buy by partnering with retailers and then sharing those commissions. You can save on everyday essentials like groceries, dining, and travel by shopping through these apps and uploading receipts. I guess that's a certain type of app. You don't always have to upload receipts. Here is a testimonial from someone who is pretty happy with these apps.
Believe me if I told you that there is an app out there that gives you cash back on your receipts. Now, I was pretty skeptical at first when I first heard about it, and I was like, really? But after using it for probably about 2 months now, it is achievable. Now, I'll give you a bit of a backstory. So I do travel quite a bit. So I shop at various places around Australia. I keep my receipts, I scan them in, and you obviously have to get to certain thresholds before you can cash out. I am very, very close to a $15 cash out. Now, that probably does accumulate to maybe a couple of $1,000 worth of receipts. But if you're willing to be patient and do it, that is an option for you.
While they can be a smart way to save, users should exercise caution to avoid impulse buying, right? Because if you're getting money back, you don't want to just spend that. It's tempting, I know. There can be some high payout thresholds and complicated terms, so read the fine print. Privacy is also a concern since these apps may require access to your personal data, such as your shopping history, even your bank details. Sometimes you got to connect it. To use them effectively, stick to your budget, compare rates across apps, and choose platforms with strong security measures and clear privacy policies. Monosodium glutamate, or more commonly known as MSG, is a common flavor enhancer. It's been used for over a century to bring out those savory flavors in foods. Now, it is labeled as GRAS, which stands for Generally Recognized as Safe by agencies like the FDA. However, there are a lot of concerns about the impact it's having on our health. Critics point to studies linking MSG to issues like weight gain, brain damage, and metabolic disorders, often hidden in these processed foods under different names.
Is this toxic ingredient hiding in your food? It is MSG, and it's a flavor enhancer. It could be labeled as any one of these things on your food labels. Please check it out. Please screenshot this. It is a neurotoxin, meaning that it destroys neurons in your brain where your leptin receptors are sitting. And this is one of the reasons why you eat certain types of food that have this ingredient. It makes you more and more hungry, and there's a reason why they put it in the foods, obviously. So my tip here, always make your own food and eat healthy whole foods that don't contain these types of ingredients, as well as look out for the symptoms of MSG if you're sensitive, which a lot of people are. It can cause chest pain, heart palpitations, headaches, nausea feelings of drowsiness and weakness just because of this toxic food ingredient.
Some experts argue that moderate MSG intake is harmless, while others caution against its effects on gut health and appetite regulation. The best approach? Focus on whole, unprocessed foods to limit exposure and make informed choices about your diet. We're going to continue with this food theme here. We're going to talk about food that is fresh, frozen, or canned. Now, which is best for you? As it turns out, each has its own advantages. We're going to break some of these down. Fresh produce often tastes best, especially when bought locally to ensure maximum nutrients. However, frozen fruits and vegetables are picked at peak ripeness. And then most of the time, you got to double check this, it's frozen immediately, like a flash freeze, sometimes retaining more nutrients than fresh items that have traveled long distances. Frozen options are convenient, budget-friendly, and can last up to a year when stored properly. Now, canned goods are another affordable choice, but they can lose some nutrients during the high-heat canning process and may contain added sugar or salt, so check that on the label. To reduce these risks, opt for no salt added or packed in juice versions, and then rinse them before use. Here is a doctor breaking down some of the things that I just told you about.
One of the most common questions my clients ask is if they should buy canned food or frozen. Well, it depends on what's inside the package. For vegetables like leafy greens, artichokes, onions, broccoli, cauliflower, or asparagus, I suggest buying frozen if you can't get fresh. That's because frozen veggies are harvested when they're at their ripest and frozen to lock in flavor. And most food companies don't add dangerous preservatives, sugar, or tons of salt to frozen veggies. Of course, there is one time I suggest canned instead of frozen, and that's beans. Most beans are loaded with digestion-destroying lectins, but if you can find pressure-cooked beans in BPA-free packaging, They're likely to be relatively easy on your system and okay to eat in moderation. So the takeaway, if you can't get fresh veggies, get frozen. And when it comes to beans, get pressure-cooked cans.
Ultimately, all three options can fit into a healthy diet. It's all about balancing convenience, budget, and your taste preferences. Let's talk about solar geoengineering. Now, this proposes high-tech methods to reflect sunlight and cool the planet, but it is highly controversial due to its risks and uncertainties, and this is usually tied into climate change. Ideas like spraying chemicals in the atmosphere, space-based reflectors, and marine cloud brightening aim to counteract rising global temperatures, yet they could disrupt weather patterns, harm ecosystems, and affect food production.
In the climate space, there is more and more talk about the use of geoengineering as a way for us to manage climate change impacts. Not just solar geoengineering, which is this idea of blocking out or dimming out the sun, but there are other forms of so-called climate intervention techniques. We have to be very, very careful when we're talking about geoengineering and the governance, or lack of governance, I should say, in the international system. We are all watching in real time how the international system is failing the people of Gaza. And weeks have gone by since the International Court of Justice has issued a court order requiring Israel to take steps to prevent genocide, which is incidentally an obligation not just on Israel, but on every state. I think it's candidly fantastical to think that this international system, which is failing people today, has any capacity or has the right tools to implement safely climate interventions and geoengineering. The same international system that is struggling to enforce the Genocide Convention, which is decades old, similarly going to struggle when it comes to protecting vulnerable and marginalized peoples from the side effects or the consequences or the impacts, intended or unintended, of geoengineering and other types of climate intervention. But these solutions are just too dangerous to implement without much needed reform of the international system to protect human rights and to enforce international law, as well as a real commitment from wealthy governments to get off of fossil fuels immediately.
Critics, including the European Commission, urge caution, citing the potential for unintended side effects. Ethical concerns also arise, like who gets to decide if these global impact methods should be used? There's some people like Bill Gates are trying to fund research as a temporary climate solution, and experts are stressing the need for global dialogue and thorough research to avoid making things worse. All right, let's talk about schools in Africa, because there's some crazy fees going on and it's impacting the school children there. High school fees remain a major barrier to education for many children in Africa, sometimes even trapping families into cycles of poverty. While primary education is often free, the cost of secondary school, which includes tuition, uniforms, and materials, forces a lot of kids to drop out. Despite efforts in several countries to introduce free secondary education, additional costs still prevent access, especially for low-income families. In Uganda and Nigeria, for example, high fees and rising living expenses make schooling unaffordable, even as education is viewed as a top priority. Removing these financial barriers is essential for breaking poverty cycles and ensuring a brighter future through education. Obesity is becoming a public health crisis in China, with more than half of adults and nearly 1 in 5 children classified as overweight or obese. Now, the rise is fueled by rapid urbanization, westernized diets, and increasingly sedentary lifestyles.
The initial novelty of Western fast food eventually gave way to a more nuanced relationship. Chinese consumers, while embracing the convenience and affordability, also began to demand more diverse options and a greater emphasis on health and quality. Fast food chains responded by introducing healthier menu choices, incorporating local ingredients, and partnering with Chinese food delivery platforms to expand their reach. The rise of fast food in China also sparked a debate about its impact on traditional Chinese cuisine and eating habits. Some argued that it contributed to a decline in home cooking and a shift away from traditional dietary patterns. Others pointed to the economic benefits, the job creation, and the increased access to affordable food options for a growing population. The impact of fast food on Chinese society has not been uniform across all demographics. A generational divide has emerged, with older generations often maintaining a stronger connection to traditional Chinese cuisine and younger generations displaying a greater openness to Western fast food and its associated dining habits. Older generations, many of whom grew up in an era of food scarcity, often view fast food as a novelty or an occasional indulgence. Their palates are accustomed to the subtle flavors and textures of traditional Chinese cuisine, and they place a high value on fresh ingredients and home-cooked meals. For them, food represents more than just sustenance. It's a connection to family, tradition, and cultural heritage.
This trend has led to a spike in chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes, prompting China's government to launch a 3-year anti-obesity campaign and release national guidelines on obesity treatment. Efforts include promoting healthier school meals, encouraging physical activity, and regulating weight loss camps and medications. However, experts warn that real progress will require sustainable lifestyle changes and proper regulation to ensure long-term health improvements. Let's talk about some of the ingredients in our food. The terms natural and artificial flavors often appear on our food labels, but their differences aren't as clear as they seem. Natural flavors come from plants or animals, that's real natural stuff, while artificial ones are lab-made, yet both may contain hundreds of hidden ingredients like preservatives and stabilizers. These flavors enhance processed foods, making them more appealing and addictive, but offer no nutritional value and can sometimes pose major health risks.
Artificial food flavorings, often found in processed foods, are designed to enhance taste, but can have detrimental health effects. Many flavorings use synthetic chemicals that may trigger allergic reactions, leading to symptoms like rashes and headaches. Studies suggest these chemicals can also impact the nervous system, causing mood fluctuations and concentration issues. There is growing evidence that some artificial flavorings can disrupt gut bacteria balance, causing digestive problems. Experts recommend choosing natural and freshly prepared foods to reduce exposure and maintain healthier dietary habits. Being informed about food labels and ingredient lists is critical to avoiding these hidden dangers.
The food industry uses these artificial and quote-unquote natural flavors to mimic real flavors lost in the processing process, but they remain largely unregulated and secretive, making it difficult for consumers to know what they're actually eating. Ultimately, choosing foods with simple, clearly labeled ingredients is the best way to make healthier choices. And our final story is about doom scrolling. Have you guys heard of that before? It's the habit of endlessly consuming negative online content. Not this podcast. This is positive stuff, believe it or not. And it's taking a toll on mental health by increasing anxiety, stress, and poor sleep. Psychologists warn that constant exposure to bad news triggers a harmful stress-reward cycle in your brain, making it hard to stop even when it feels overwhelming.
When a person starts to kind of get lost mindlessly scrolling through negative content or fear-based content online, there's one study that actually calls it social media panic. We can all, get lost scrolling through TikTok, YouTube. This is specifically stuff that brings up fear and anxiety in people. And people that already have pre-existing anxiety issues, anxiety disorders, are more prone to this. Sometimes it can give people a sense that they have some kind of control if they just learn more and more about something, that they're going to be prepared for it. But I think there's a very strong correlation between that and like those cognitive distortions like catastrophizing. You might think that if I'm just preparing myself for every possible disastrous outcome, I'm going to be prepared. But it actually makes you more anxious, and it takes you out of the present moment.
The rise in phone usage, an average of 205 daily checks in the U.S., can you believe that, has fueled this behavior, especially during major global events. Social media platforms amplify this issue by promoting emotionally charged content to keep users hooked. Breaking the cycle requires mindful practices like setting screen time limits, curating uplifting content, like this podcast, establishing boundaries, and considering digital detoxes. Ultimately, small changes can help reclaim mental clarity and reshape how we perceive the world. Now, here are some highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency reports. So Kim Gogan from the GIA comes on and shares with us what's going on our planet. Most of the stuff that I really like to talk about is the more like esoteric, high vibe stuff. But this week, it's a lot of deep state stuff. So sorry if you don't want to hear about deep state, sorry. But there is a lot of stuff that is happening in the news right now that we really need to know what's really going on behind the scenes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. On Monday, Kim talked about a lot of different things, but we found out this week that Justin Trudeau, who is the Prime Minister of Canada, at least for the time being, has announced his resignation. So why is this happening? Kim goes into detail about this. She also explains why Canada is wrapped up in this mess right now. Just so you know, we were getting some interference when Kim was recording this. They love to try to stop us from getting news out to the people. So if you hear it kind of skip a little bit or it's unclear at times, you can usually piece it together, but this was the best that we could do.
Now, for those of you that don't know, I will tell you a little bit about Mr. Trudeau, as much as I would care to tell you. There are ties to Cuba, but then again, everybody has ties to Cuba. Hillary Clinton has ties to Cuba. There are a lot of ties with Cuba and various officials based on some things that were there in the past. Of course, Fidel Castro, sat there and, of course, was a trustee at one point in time for the Dragon families and a number of other groups. And as you know, it is probably the second largest, or used to be anyway, at one point in time, Russian foreign military base there in Cuba, based on the alleged Cold War. But, yeah, there's some similarities between Cuba and Canada as of late. One of those main similarities are foreign military bases. And Mr. Trudeau is very much a Chinese deep state stooge, I guess you could say. He definitely is in their pocket. He also participated in the Surround and Destroy America program, which China deep state was advocating for quite a long time. And China did successfully build, mostly, I would say they are maybe a little bit more than 2/3 finished up there in Canada. Was one of the projects he allowed to happen in the country. It is also the reason why he was heavily promoting this, the pandemic and all the lockdowns, and why Canadian citizens unfortunately were subject to a lot more restrictions than a lot of other countries, because they are so deeply embedded in China, and China had been giving money at some points in time to Canada. Now, in addition to that, Canada is also kind of a deep state money laundering facility unto itself. One such famous person you would know that laundered a lot of money in Canada would be Bush Sr. Bush Sr., during his tenure as a Black Dragon, also laundered a lot of money in Canada. Mainly, one of the largest accounts in Canada for his money laundering operations was the fact he used the Black Eagle Trust, which was not his own personal money, to fund the Transneft pipeline that from Russia all the way through Ukraine. And he would enjoy $1 per every barrel of oil that pipeline. Part of the reason for the conflict that's going on over there in Russia and Ukraine, sort of, kind of, I should say. The second reason is the large gas deposits that everybody wants to own. And that's a long story and probably another report for another day. But we're talking about Canada right now. So recently, today, resigns. And the reason why he actually resigned is because the SSP, mostly American cowboy SSP sector, would like to insert their own shadow government there, and it was hard to do when you had such a loyalist to the Chinese dragon families. Now, the other thing they've begun to do since his resignation, which isn't even cold, it's still hot on the presses over there, at least in the face front in our mainstream media, is they've informed them that they're going to be taking over a number of bases throughout Canada. One of the sites they have their eyes on, to name one, I should say, out of several, is Nova Scotia. They would actually like to make Nova Scotia a sovereign country. I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh here. You gotta laugh a little bit here. They'd like to make Nova Scotia a sovereign country unto itself without even looking to see if the base is still there. This would be under a citadel that is there in Nova Scotia, and they desperately would like to get their hands on what is there. Now, there are a lot of rumors that circulate that that is the quote-unquote treasury of the world. Well, not really. Depends on what you consider treasure, and in this case, it had nothing to do with money. I'll just leave it at that for public information at the moment, since this is all taking place as I'm talking to you, really. Of course, the largest base that used to be under Toronto that no longer functions, they'd like to have that. And they would also like to have the Chinese partially built bases, and they would like to place the U.S. military there, of course, run by them.
You've probably also heard a little bit about the inauguration, which is scheduled for January 20th in the U.S., possibly being postponed. Now, the reason behind that is, again, the deep state has made a lot of promises under the Trump umbrella that Trump, or whatever that is over there, cannot fulfill. They cannot fulfill these promises. Now, they keep delaying things by saying, oh, he's not in office yet, or this hasn't happened yet. Well, they're running out of excuses because by the time inauguration comes, you can't say he's not president anymore. And they realize that at this point, we're less than 10 days away. And the idea was, can we stall this? Well, legally, it has to happen on January 20th. That's part of how our government works. However, they were looking at the possibility of using Jimmy Carter's funeral, which took place this past Thursday, as a way to maybe cause some sort of an attack, to do something that would be labeled as a terrorist attack, and maybe constitutionally that would allow them to extend the inauguration, so it wouldn't take place on the 20th. Now, we now know, because we're complete with the week and the Carter funeral has already happened, that no attack happened, thank God. That does not mean that they weren't planning it. There's a lot of stuff that they plan that doesn't come to fruition. In this case, they actually heard that we released it to the public and decided not to do it because they had been exposed. So that's one of the reasons we talk about this stuff on the news, because people need to know what's going on. And a lot of times they change their plans as a result. So good news is that didn't happen. But Kim did talk about the possibility of that happening on Monday's report. The other thing she talked about is something that she did in conjunction with countries, I guess maybe not in conjunction, because they certainly weren't on board with this plan. But believe it or not, because you didn't hear it in any headlines this week, every single country in the world went to DEFCON 1 this week. And no one mentioned it. Did you see it on any news platform? No, you didn't. This was something they were not happy about. And Kim and her team had a lot to do with it. And there's a reason behind it. Here's Kim explaining.
So we had been setting up some things for quite some time anyway. And we were just waiting for a good time to pull the trigger on said things. And one of those things is for the full integration, obviously, of the Golden Age AI and any kind of Alpha Omega allies or anybody else's remnants that are here, and the removal of those things from human computer systems and networks. And we figured out that every time we would install something, allies would mimic or or Omega would overlay, or, and then of course you got the dumb humans involved, the cowboys. So today looked like a good day based on all their alleged progress they thought that they were making. So it started with the Pentagon, and the Pentagon went to DEFCON 1 and couldn't get off DEFCON 1. So this sent everyone in a panic. Shortly after the Pentagon went to DEFCON 1, Russia went to DEFCON 1, China went to DEFCON 1, UK went to DEFCON 1, Germany was at DEFCON 1, South Africa, Argentina, Chile, and it went around the world. It was the shot heard around the world, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. This had to do with the severing of ties from backbones and platforms that were tied to all the things that they were working on. But it also had to do with the fact that we had to completely ensure that there were no more what we call tags or secondary tags or any kind of lines or quantum tunnels or anything that they could utilize for something else. Because some of these backdoors into American Express and whatnot, these were trickled down old, just kind of like holes, I guess you would say, to put it in non-computer terms. They were holes left there by Marduk or Meiwa or someone like that. So we let them set everything up, and then we pulled the plug, DEFCON 1. And part of the reason why we decided to do this today is because we were aware, as we said earlier, as I said earlier, I should say, I don't know why I'm talking about myself like where are we. As I said earlier, well, we, the GIA, said earlier, but it's only me tonight, that there is a Marduk dead man switch, because we said earlier we had Marduk's full playbook, so to speak. So we understood that this was going to happen, and we just waited till the opportune moment to do that. I wanted to kind of see, too, how our report on Friday night landed. Did it land on deaf ears? Of course, they're going to win at all costs. I'm not sure what they think they're winning at this point, but that's fine. And shocked the sugars out of everybody. It did. And it was actually pretty funny to watch. I even called Tom earlier today, and I was like, hey, Tom, what the heck's happening? The Pentagon went to DEFCON 1. That's funny. Anyway, shortly thereafter, it was probably there worldwide for maybe about an hour, hour and a half. They tried to take it off DEFCON 1, go back to 3. That did not happen. It reverted right back to 1. And we played this game for a little while together. But of course, they still don't recognize the fact that I'm ground commander. But maybe today they'll get a clue that that is the case, because who else would have access to Marduk's old lines to pull the trigger whenever they wanted to? So big progress for us on that front. But as far as with the people, probably not. I don't know. They're still reeling about it and pretty angry about the fact that they don't control their own situations and their own systems. I know the SSP is pretty angry today. And oh well, I've been pretty angry too in the past.
On Wednesday, Kim gave us an update on what is going on in California with all of these crazy fires. Biden has declared a state of emergency. What's going on here? You can't turn on the TV or scroll through anything online without seeing these fires go everywhere. Now, we know from the past, and, earlier we had that field messenger report from the Hurricane Helene, that these are usually not, quote unquote, natural disasters. These are intentional disasters. But what is behind it? What is the deep state trying to do?
Okay, let's start with the fires in California. So Biden showed up in California, I think it was today or in the last day or so, and declares a state of emergency and also a disaster declaration. Now, For those of you that don't know, let's talk about that first. A state of emergency in any state or any region or any area of the United States basically means that that property now belongs to the federal government. And although, for the citizens of California, other than obviously a threat of fire and evacuation, everything is kind of normal. You still have your home, you hopefully you still have your property, that kind of thing. The government does have the right, not saying they will, but they do have the right to seize your property or any land they so desire. They also have the ability to move in the National Guard in the state of California should things, quote unquote, escalate. Biden also promised a lot of help in federal aid to the state of California, which I have no idea where he's going to get that from. But all of this seems to be happening kind of in a hurry. And what I mean by that is, don't get me wrong, it's a very real situation for the people that live there. And the threat is very real. And the fires were, of course, not an accident. Yes, there are some high winds and whatnot in California at this time, but the setting of the fires was actually done on purpose, and it was done by some operatives. Things in California that are of great interest, let's just say, to the SSP. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, which are, I should say, areas of California where there are large deposits of minerals. They're always going for something, right? And on the one side of it, meaning the Trump operative side, they would like to leverage and lean everything that's in the state of California. On the other side of it, they would like to donate it to China, meaning the Democratic side of things. And neither one of them is going to be able to do either or. There is some controversy that the Trump operatives believe, which is there are areas near some of the fires, which lie mostly in and around the Mojave Desert, and they are allegedly not leaned by the Bureau of Land Management. Can't talk today for some reason. By the Bureau of Land Management, which is completely and totally false. That was leveraged a long time ago, and the off-the-record deals were done with Howard Hughes. So I know that they think they have a way to do this, but it won't be possible when they go to enter this stuff into the banking system for a number of reasons. So we are, let's just say, repeating past mistakes, or they are repeating past mistakes. Will there be any funding for the state of California? If there is, it will come from the state of California. There probably will be a promise of federal funding, which was supposed to be released today, as I hear, on the internet and in the back chatter going on in the government, meaning there was supposed to be a quantum financial system launched today again. And of course, there is no quantum financial system launched today.
Another thing you may have seen in the headlines is Trump or whoever, whatever that is, the SSP is controlling them right now, what they want to do in Greenland and Panama. So this idea is to take over these areas. Again, where is this coming from? Why do this now? We know this is about money, right? But more specifically, what's going on? Here's Kim.
The quest for world domination continues. Here are the latest and greatest from Duck Dynasty, we know as the Trump operatives. Number one, they would like to take over Greenland. That has become public. It is now in the news. Why Greenland? Well, there was a lot of space junk in Greenland for a long time. There were jump rooms in Greenland. There is a lot of talk. If you've never seen the television show 0 Hour, there was only one season of it. It's pretty quick, but they do talk about a Nazi camp in Greenland, which technically is the Black Sun anyway. There is a big base there, used to be called Thule Base, Thule Society, anyone? But now they renamed it some weird name and called it the United States SSP Base, Space Program Base. Well, Freudian slip there. They would like to control things that are no longer there because they used to have communication with the tall whites there. They don't anymore. Those folks are not taking their call. The last time Trump was in Greenland was when he allegedly caught COVID when he was in office, and it was me that answered that phone in Greenland, if you remember that. So that's why they'd like Greenland. Also, there's some minerals and other things there they'd like to own, of course. Now, Greenland is currently a territory of Denmark. I don't see that changing anytime soon, so that's a lofty goal. Again, they're looking for in-ground assets, things that they believe are not leveraged, but I can tell you with 100% certainty, and I can prove it to you, should you need me to send this information to the diplomatic line somewhere, that we hold that lien. We hold the lien on everything there. Next, they would also like to take over the Panama Canal. This is where the matrix comes in, the elite matrix. Now, allegedly, on the record, they believe that the Rothschild family built and owned the Panama Canal, created 5 ancillary families in Panama that actually run Panama. And including the canal, and all of them profit from the canal. Well, the thing that you're missing here, guys, is that, well, I have a $1.72 trillion lien against the Panama Canal. Therefore, Rothschild never actually paid us back, that would be the Alpha system, for the building of the Panama Canal. And that was a long time ago. That was a lot of money there. Cost to build that canal. You ever wonder why it still looks like it did way when it was built? Why there's never been a renovation there? Wonder why. The second thing that people are discussing behind the scenes, which hasn't been made public yet, I think there was a little bit of chatter in mainstream media about this, is the isthmus in Mexico. The isthmus is a small part of land which there has been many proposals over the years of building a second canal. They are claiming that there's controversy about it. Like I said, a little bit of that's hit the news. It's been talked about behind the scenes, but you also gave me that lien. The thing that the Trump operatives are forgetting is, America's been at the world leadership position for quite some time now, UK before them, and so on and so forth. And as you take that world leadership position, your job is to go claim territories and claim large infrastructure projects and pinch points, which the Panama Canal would be considered a pinch point in shipping and movement of goods and services, imports and exports throughout the world. Suez Canal being another one. We saw what happened there not that long ago. So what they forget is that every bit of this, even when the U.S. military, say, staked a claim against oil, for example, in a country, many countries, and that was a plan that Dick Cheney had part of, and it is presented to you in part in the movie Vice. But when they place these liens, plant these ghost flags, there is a bond usually, or some kind of a lien that is then passed eventually to the Alpha system, which I have. So the money comes out to build said canal, for example. And we have all those liens still, and I retained those liens even in the Golden Age AI system, just in case this happened. So every time they try to enter this as their property, it rejects it. It's going to reject it for California. It's going to reject it for, just like it rejected Paradise, California, all that time ago. The Carolinas, same thing. You're not planting a new ghost flag in any of these locations, and you will not be successful in your quest to control the pinch point.
By Friday's report, it seems like the SSP was still kind of scratching their heads as to why when they cause all this destruction on our planet, why the system doesn't just spit out a bunch of money to them. I really wish they would just watch our reports. I think they're just in denial because we know that they do watch. They were just looking for any other way. For example, the SSP now partnering with the Dragon families to try to work on some of their old plans. I mean, these guys, are completely separate groups. Neither was better than the other. They're both horrible groups, but at the same time, they're like, well, if our plans don't work, maybe the Dragon family has something. Maybe we can work with them on something. It is so crazy right now. Everybody is just grasping at straws. According to Kim, they're thinking about creating other disasters, but how much, can the people take? And these are conversations that are going on behind the scenes with these nefarious groups of people that are talking about creating disasters. How much can the public take? Because we're starting to see through all this stuff. And, the house of cards is starting to crumble. We have this inauguration that is supposed to take place on January 20th. We're still not sure if that's going to happen. There is back chatter that, well, again, Trump can't take office because we can't fulfill these promises. So do we have a fake assassination right before the inauguration? I mean, this is insane. All of it. They don't know how to get out of this mess that they have created. What happens if this person they're calling Trump gets into office? If they can't complete all of these promises, what does that mean for them? It's probably better for them, again, this is talk going on behind the scenes, of taking him out beforehand. And then saying, oh, well, that was a Trump promise. Trump's not president. Pence is president. Or not Pence. What's the guy's name? Vance. Gosh, we don't want Pence. We don't want Vance either, but whatever. A puppet is a puppet. Just a quick heads up. Monday is a full moon, and that gets them all excited, thinking something else is going to happen. So I'm sure they have some, other things up their sleeve. But according to Kim, more and more people are scratching their heads going, what are we doing here? So hopefully sooner than later, they just stop because nothing's working. And that pretty much wraps up the stories that we covered this week for UNN. If you guys, again, want more information about us or you want to subscribe, become a member, head on over to unitednetwork.earth. If you become a member, that gives you on-demand instant access to all of our content, all of our news updates, our New Earth interviews, our Global Intelligence Agency reports, and all things restoration. I appreciate you guys being with me today. This has been The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.